fourth graders. It's Mrs. Watts here, and I'm here to give you another fabulous lesson that I'm so excited about on author's purpose and message. So the last time we talked about author's purpose and message in a fiction text. And today we're going to be looking at author's purpose and message in poetry. So your objective today is I can identify and explain the author's purpose and message in a text. Now, you're probably asking, well, what are purposes? Why do authors write poetry? Well, a lot of times authors write poetry to express feelings or emotions. I don't know about you, but sometimes it's hard for me to talk about how I'm feeling, and sometimes it's easier for me to write it down. And so poems often do that. Poets often take all their feelings and they kind of write them all down, and sometimes from those feelings, these poems emerge. Sometimes authors write poetry to talk about an impactful event in their life or another person's life. Sometimes poets like Shel Silverstein just write poems to make you laugh, something silly, right? Some people really enjoy that kind of thing. And sometimes authors write poems to make a dedication to somebody or to a group of people. Now, what do the authors want you to get out of it? What's the message? So sometimes they want to give you a new perspective, right? They want to give you their perspective, right? Which might be different. My perspective and how I see and view the world is very different than how you may see or view the world. A lot of times it's to make you feel something, right? To make you feel love, or to understand love, or to talk to you about trust, things like that. And sometimes it's to teach you a life lesson. And remember, fiction sometimes also teaches a life lesson. The message is to teach a life lesson. So how do I do that, right? How do I find the author's purpose and message in a poem? Well, the first thing you got to do is read and sometimes reread the poem. Poetry can be very difficult to understand. And so oftentimes you have to read it more than once. Then you want to look, does the poet make comparisons? Do they compare one thing to another? Or are they describing people? Are they describing feelings? Are they describing events? And a lot of times the poems and poets, they won't come right out and say exactly what it is they're describing. You kind of have to use the description to create an image or visualize to figure out what they're talking about. Then once you look for those things, you want to think about it. What is the poet trying to tell me? What is happening in the poem? And then finally, you're going to analyze or examine, what does the poet want me to understand? So this is how you're going to find the author's purpose and message. And we're going to try that with a poem that I found called The Rose That Grew from Concrete. And this was written by Tupac Shakur in 1999. And Tupac Shakur was an African-American rapper, actor, poet, and activist. He continues to be considered an influential rapper today and has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And as you read, I want you to be thinking, this says take notes, but I want you to be thinking about how the speaker or the poet, the person who wrote it, the author, feels about the rose. Now, you may be asking, how was this poem in 1999 if he passed away in 1996? Well, sometimes when someone passes away, they leave behind things like journals. And so when people find those journals and they see these poems that he's written, they put them out for publication. So the publication may come after that person has passed away. All right, so let's read The Rose That Grew from Concrete. And I want you to be thinking about how the speaker feels. I want you to be looking for comparisons. I want you to be looking for descriptions. Is he describing a person, a thing, an event, a feeling? All right, so here we go. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. So let's read it again. Let's reread the poem. The rose that grew from concrete. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. So Tupac is talking about this rose. And I know in my background knowledge that roses usually grow on rose bushes planted in soil. But this rose is growing in the concrete. That's interesting. It learned to walk without having feet. That would be a really difficult thing to do. And you know what? A rose growing in concrete would be a really difficult thing to do. Let's keep reading. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. By keeping its dreams. I wonder what the dream of a rose would be. To grow and bloom and be beautiful, right? It learned to breathe fresh air, to bloom, even though no one else ever cared. So let's look. Does the poet make comparisons? Do they describe people, feelings, or events? Well, yeah. The poet describes how this rose grew out of the concrete, which is impossible, never seen before, something that is very difficult to do. So what is the poet trying to tell me? I think he's trying to tell me that even though life could be difficult, I can still bloom, right? Like the rose. I can still grow. I can still follow my dreams. So I think the message here is to overcome your obstacles, or to not let your obstacles stop you. So I think his purpose here is to express feelings or emotions. I think maybe he felt a little like a rose growing out of concrete, someone who had lots of obstacles and things in his way. And his message, I think, is to teach me a life lesson, to not give up, to overcome my obstacles. So Tupac's trying to tell me to never give up. Don't let your obstacles stop you from becoming the person you dream about being. I think that's an amazing life lesson. And I hope that you really take that lesson to heart, because you have so much potential, boys and girls. Now, let's look at something else, okay? This is a video, an advertisement that's uses this poem or the ideas of this poem, okay? So let's watch this.
You see, you wouldn't ask why the rose that grew from the concrete had damaged petals. On the contrary, we would all celebrate its tenacity. We would all love its will to reach the sun. Well, we are the roses. This is the concrete. These are my damaged petals. Don't ask me why. Ask me how.
It was powerful. I love when he said, we are the roses, you and I, all the kids in your class, your teacher, we're the roses. And the environment that we live in, sometimes not always good, is the concrete. And we have to grow from that concrete. And in this situation, even with virtual, when you can't be with your friends and you can't see your teacher face to face and be in school, that is like the concrete. It is difficult. It is an obstacle. But if we hold on to our dreams, like this young man in this video did, we can become the person that we dream to be. And so this guy, he dreamed to become, I guess, a basketball star, and he eventually went on to play professional basketball. So the message here in this video is the same, I think. Let's go on to the next slide. Whoops. Okay. So the author's purpose. So, well, this was an advertisement, right? And if you notice, there were little things in the advertisement, and at the end, it had that big sign on I don't know what you call it, whatever, the basketball court, and it had said Powerade, right? And then at the end, there was a Powerade bottle, and you saw that little kid putting the Powerade bottle into his backpack. So the purpose here of an advertisement usually is to sell me something or to persuade me to do something. And this was to persuade me to buy Powerade, right? But the author's message was still the same. Even though the purpose was different, the message was the same. It was the same as the poem, to overcome your obstacles, to never stop dreaming. So why does Powerade do that? Why do they use a message like that? I want you to think about that. Why would they keep the message of the poem or use the message of the poem before a different purpose? Why would they want a message like overcoming your obstacles be tied to trying to sell you Powerade? What do you think that's about? So I'm going to tell you again, here's some purposes in poetry: to express feelings or emotions, to tell about an impactful event in a person's life, to make you laugh, do something silly, to make a dedication to someone or a group of people. I want you to think about and keep these purposes in your mind as you continue reading poetry this week. And what do you think the poet's message is to you? Are they trying to give you a new perspective? Are they trying to make you feel something, teach you a life lesson? Maybe they're trying to teach you about something like content-wise too. Maybe they're trying to teach you about the earth or something like that. So keep those things in mind, okay? So that is all for now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I really hoped you enjoyed this lesson on author's purpose and message, and you have some really interesting and deep discussions with your teacher in class. And I look forward, those virtual students, I look forward to seeing your discussions in Schoology.